Welcome to Z Cineplex, say your ultimate entertainment destination. Welcome to Z Cineplex, the home of entertainment, creativity, and cinematic excitement. Our channel is dedicated to bringing viewers a rich collection of engaging content that celebrates the world of movies, storytelling, and visual entertainment. Whether you're a passionate film enthusiast, someone who enjoys discovering new cinematic experiences, or simply looking for high-quality entertainment, Z Cineplex is designed to be your go-to destination. We strive to create content that is informative, enjoyable, and engaging for audiences of all ages, offering a unique blend of movie-related features, entertainment updates, insightful discussions, creative videos, and much more. Every upload is crafted with attention to quality, ensuring that our viewers receive an enjoyable experience that keeps them coming back for more. At Z Cineplex, we believe that cinema is more than just watching films. It's about experiencing emotions, exploring stories, appreciating creativity, and connecting with people who share the same passion for entertainment. Our mission is to build a vibrant community where movie lovers and entertainment enthusiasts can discover exciting content, share their opinions, and stay connected with the latest trends in the entertainment industry. We are committed to consistently improving our content, embracing new ideas, and delivering videos that entertain, inform, and inspire our growing audience. Whether you're here for movie highlights, entertainment discussions, reviews, cinematic moments, or fresh creative content, Z Cineplex promises an enjoyable journey filled with excitement, quality, and unforgettable entertainment. Join our community by subscribing, turning on notifications, and becoming part of the Z Cineplex family as we continue to explore the fascinating world of cinema and entertainment together. Thank you for your support, and welcome to Z Cineplex, wherever video brings entertainment to life. Flight is a 2012 American drama film directed by Academy Award-winning filmmaker Robert Zemeckis from an original screenplay by John Gatins. The film was produced by Walter F. Parks, Laurie MacDonald, Steve Starkey, Robert Zemeckis, and Jack Rapk under the banners of Image Movers, Parks, MacDonald Productions, and Paramount Pictures. It marked Zemeckis' long-awaited return to live-action filmmaking after more than a decade devoted primarily to performance capture films such as The Polar Express, 2004, Beowulf, 2007, and A Christmas Carol, 2009. Making Flight his first live-action feature since directing Cast Away and What Lies Beneath in 2000. Blending psychological drama, suspense, and character study, the film explores themes of addiction, denial, accountability, morality, redemption, and the complex nature of heroism, while presenting a realistic and emotionally charged portrayal of substance abuse and its devastating personal and professional consequences. The film stars two-time Academy Award winner Denzel Washington in one of the most celebrated performances of his career as Captain William Whittaker Sr., a highly experienced commercial airline pilot whose extraordinary skill and composure enable him to perform a near-impossible emergency landing after a catastrophic in-flight mechanical failure leaves his aircraft uncontrollable. Through quick thinking and exceptional piloting ability, Whittaker manages to save the lives of 96 of the 102 people on board, instantly becoming a national hero and media sensation. However, the public admiration surrounding his miraculous actions begins to unravel when an official investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, uncovers evidence indicating that he had consumed large amounts of alcohol and cocaine before operating the flight. As investigators, attorneys, airline executives, and the media scrutinize every aspect of the crash, Whittaker finds himself forced to confront not only the legal consequences of his actions but also the personal demons that have long controlled his life. What initially appears to be an inspirational survival story gradually transforms into a deeply moving examination of addiction, self-deception, responsibility, truth, and the possibility of redemption through honesty and personal sacrifice. Supporting Washington is an acclaimed ensemble cast featuring Kelly Reilly as Nicole Megan, a recovering heroin addict who becomes Whittaker's love interest, and emotional anchor Don Cheadle as Hugh Lang, the ambitious defense attorney determined to protect Whittaker from criminal liability. Bruce Greenwood as Charlie Anderson, Whitaker's longtime friend and representative of the pilots' union John Goodman as Harling Mays, Whitaker's charismatic yet morally questionable drug supplier and drinking companion Melissa Leo as Ellen Block, the lead investigator from the NTSB Tamara Tooney as Margaret Thomason, the flight attendants union representative Brian Garrity as Ken Evans, Whitaker's loyal co-pilot James Badgedale as First Officer Ken Evans, Nadine Velasquez as Flight Attendant Katerina Trina M. A. As Peter Zarate as Avington Carr, Chairman of the NTSB hearing, and Garcelle Beauvais in a supporting role. Each character contributes to the film's exploration of ethics, loyalty, addiction, justice, and the difficult choices surrounding truth and accountability. One of the film's most acclaimed achievements is its breathtaking opening airplane disaster sequence, which has been widely praised as one of the most realistic and technically accomplished aviation scenes ever filmed. Combining practical effects, detailed cockpit procedures, visual effects, and Zemeckis' trademark technical precision, the sequence creates extraordinary tension while grounding the subsequent drama in realism. Rather than focusing solely on the disaster itself, however, Flight uses the crash as a catalyst for an intimate character-driven narrative, examining the emotional and psychological fallout experienced by its deeply flawed protagonist. Critics frequently noted that while the opening sequence is spectacular, the film's greatest strength lies in its refusal to simplify Whitaker into either a hero or a villain, instead portraying him as a profoundly conflicted individual struggling with addiction and denial. Flight had its world premiere at the New York Film Festival on October 14, 2012, where it received an enthusiastic reception from critics and audiences alike. The film was subsequently released theatrically in the United States on November 2, 2012. By Paramount Pictures in both conventional and IMAX theaters. Upon release, it earned widespread critical acclaim, with reviewers praising Robert Zemeckis' confident return to live-action filmmaking after 12 years, John Gatins' intelligent and emotionally resonant screenplay, and especially Denzel Washington's commanding, emotionally layered performance, which many critics regarded as one of the finest of his career. Reviewers also highlighted the film's mature handling of alcoholism, drug dependency, ethical responsibility, and personal redemption, while applauding its ability to balance high-intensity suspense with intimate character drama. Many critics described Flight as one of the strongest adult-oriented dramas released in 2012 and praised its willingness to challenge audiences by presenting a morally complex protagonist whose heroic actions coexist with deeply destructive personal behavior. Produced on a relatively modest budget of approximately $31 million, Flight exceeded commercial expectations by becoming both a critical and financial success. The film grossed approximately $161.8 million worldwide, including more than $93 million in the United States and Canada and nearly $69 million from international markets, making it one of the year's most profitable adult dramas. Its strong box office performance demonstrated the continued appeal of original, character-focused dramas led by major stars despite increasing competition from franchise films and superhero blockbusters. The film received numerous accolades throughout the 2012-2013 awards season. At the 85th Academy Awards, it earned 2 nominations, Best Actor for Denzel Washington, marking his 6th Oscar nomination, and Best Original Screenplay for John Gatins. Washington's performance also received nominations from the Golden Globe Awards, Screen Actors Guild Awards, Critics' Choice Awards, Satellite Awards, and several regional critics associations. In addition, Flight appeared on numerous critics' year-end top 10 lists and was recognized by organizations including the National Board of Review and the American Film Institute as one of the notable films of the year. More than a decade after its release, Flight continues to be regarded as one of Robert Zemeckis' finest live-action films and one of Denzel Washington's greatest dramatic performances, praised for its emotionally complex storytelling, unforgettable central performance, technically masterful filmmaking, and unflinching exploration of addiction, personal responsibility, and the difficult path toward redemption. On a quiet morning in Orlando, Florida, Veteran commercial airline Captain William Whip Whittaker Sr. awakens in a luxury hotel room after spending the previous night drinking heavily, taking drugs, and sleeping with flight attendant Katerina Trina M. Tilde Marquez, who is also scheduled to serve aboard his upcoming flight. Despite his outward appearance as a respected, charismatic, and highly accomplished airline captain, Whip has been secretly battling severe alcoholism and cocaine addiction for years. His dependence on alcohol and narcotics has become so deeply ingrained that he has developed an elaborate routine to conceal it from colleagues, airline officials, and even those closest to him. Although he has repeatedly convinced himself that he remains fully capable of performing his duties, his addiction now dictates nearly every aspect of his life. Still suffering from the effects of the previous night's drinking, Whip prepares for work by snorting a line of cocaine supplied by his longtime drug dealer and friend, Harling Mays. Believing the stimulant will counteract his intoxication and sharpen his concentration, he then pours vodka into a glass of orange juice, casually consuming more alcohol before reporting for duty, convinced that the mixture of cocaine and alcohol will leave him functional enough to command a commercial airliner carrying more than 100 lives. His complete denial of the severity of his addiction highlights the dangerous contradiction between his remarkable professional competence and his increasingly self-destructive private life. At the same time, elsewhere in Orlando, another individual is fighting a different but equally devastating battle with addiction. Nicole Megan, a young woman desperately attempting to escape a long history of heroin abuse, purchases heroin from a local dealer after relapsing during her recovery. Alone and emotionally broken, she injects herself but accidentally overdoses. Her life is saved only because emergency medical personnel arrive in time to revive her and rush her to a nearby hospital. Nicole's storyline serves as a parallel narrative to Whip's, illustrating two individuals trapped by addiction whose lives will soon intersect. While Nicole genuinely wishes to recover and rebuild her future despite repeated setbacks, Whip continues to deny that he even has a problem, creating a striking contrast between two people standing at very different stages of the same destructive journey. Despite still being under the influence of both alcohol and cocaine, Whip reports to Orlando International Airport and assumes command of SouthJet Flight 227, a regularly scheduled commercial passenger flight bound for Atlanta, Georgia. On board are 102 people, including passengers, pilots, and cabin crew. His first officer, Ken Evans, notices nothing unusual as Whip conducts pre-flight preparations with the confidence and professionalism expected of an experienced captain. Shortly after takeoff, once the aircraft reaches cruising altitude, Whip allows Evans to take control of the aircraft while he secretly mixes another serving of vodka into his orange juice inside the cockpit. Believing the flight will be routine, he reclines in the cockpit jump seat and falls asleep, leaving much of the flying to his capable first officer. The seemingly ordinary flight changes in an instant when the aircraft encounters severe atmospheric turbulence associated with a powerful storm system. Almost immediately afterward, a catastrophic mechanical failure causes the airplane's elevator control mechanism to malfunction, sending the aircraft into a violent nose-down dive. Passengers are violently thrown against the ceiling as luggage, food carts, and unsecured objects become deadly projectiles inside the cabin. Flight attendants struggle desperately to protect frightened passengers while maintaining order amid widespread panic. In the cockpit, multiple alarms sound simultaneously as every attempt by Evans to regain control fails. The aircraft begins plummeting toward the ground at terrifying speed, leaving only minutes before impact. Whip awakens to chaos and immediately realizes that the aircraft has suffered a catastrophic control failure unlike anything encountered in normal commercial aviation. Drawing upon decades of flying experience, military-style instincts, and exceptional technical knowledge, he quickly diagnoses the situation and recognizes that conventional recovery procedures will not save the aircraft. Remaining remarkably calm despite the impossible circumstances, He performs an unprecedented maneuver by intentionally rolling the aircraft completely upside down. Although such a maneuver is virtually unimaginable for a commercial airliner carrying passengers, Whip understands that flying inverted briefly restores limited aerodynamic control over the damaged aircraft. Working together with Evans, he manages to stabilize the airplane long enough to reduce its rate of descent before rolling it upright only moments before impact. He then expertly guides the crippled aircraft toward an open field, narrowly avoiding residential neighborhoods and other populated areas. The aircraft clips the steeple of a small church, strikes trees, skids violently across the ground, and finally comes to rest after a devastating crash landing. Despite the enormous destruction, Whip's extraordinary decisions saved 96 of the 102 people aboard. Aviation experts later conclude that no other pilot participating in simulation tests could duplicate Whip's remarkable emergency landing under identical conditions. Nevertheless, 6 people lose their lives, including flight attendant Katerina Matilda Marquez, who sacrifices herself while shielding a young passenger from the force of the crash. Whip suffers multiple fractures and serious injuries before losing consciousness as emergency responders race to the scene. Several days later, Whip regains consciousness in an Atlanta hospital surrounded by doctors, nurses, and investigators. His miraculous landing has already become headline news across the country, and television networks celebrate him as a national hero whose extraordinary flying skills prevented one of the deadliest aviation disasters in modern history. Charlie Anderson, Whip's longtime friend and representative of the Airline Pilots Union, visits him to explain that the public views him as a courageous captain who performed the impossible. Charlie also informs him that First Officer Ken Evans survived the crash but sustained catastrophic spinal injuries and remains unconscious in intensive care. Although grateful to be alive, Whip is haunted by fragmented memories of the disaster and begins struggling with the guilt of knowing he was intoxicated while responsible for so many lives. During his hospital stay, Harling Mays casually arrives carrying alcohol and drugs, treating Whip's addiction as though it were nothing more than an ordinary habit rather than a life-threatening disease. Although Whip initially rejects the offer, his refusal appears motivated more by circumstance than genuine commitment to sobriety. Outside the hospital, while taking a cigarette break, Whip encounters Nicole Megan, who is recovering from her heroin overdose. The two strangers immediately recognize the pain in one another, forming an unexpected bond rooted in their shared experiences with addiction, loneliness, and emotional isolation. Nicole openly admits that she wants to remain sober and rebuild her life, while Whip continues insisting that his drinking is under control. Their conversations reveal two individuals searching for redemption but approaching it from opposite directions. After being discharged from the hospital, Harling drives Whip to an isolated farmhouse that once belonged to Whip's deceased father. Surrounded by quiet countryside and removed from the pressures of everyday life, Whip convinces himself that he can finally overcome his addiction. In a symbolic gesture, he empties every bottle of liquor he owns into the sink and vows to remain sober. However, his determination quickly begins to crumble as reality sets in. Soon afterward, Charlie introduces Whip to prominent defense attorney Hugh Lang, who has been hired by the Airline and Pilots Union to defend him against the inevitable legal consequences of the crash. Lang explains that because Whip was unconscious after the accident, hospital personnel conducted mandatory toxicology tests revealing dangerously high levels of alcohol and cocaine in his bloodstream. Although Lang believes the evidence can probably be excluded in court because it was obtained without proper legal authorization, he warns that if the truth becomes public, Whip could lose his pilot's license, face criminal charges, and spend years in prison. Terrified by the possibility of losing everything, Whip abandons his brief attempt at sobriety and secretly resumes drinking almost immediately. Over the following weeks, Nicole moves into the farmhouse with Whip, and the two begin building what appears to be a loving relationship. Nicole genuinely believes that together they can overcome their addictions and create a healthier future. She regularly attends Narcotics Anonymous meetings, works diligently to remain sober, and encourages Whip to seek professional treatment for his alcoholism. Although he repeatedly promises that he will quit drinking, Whip continues hiding bottles throughout the house and secretly consuming alcohol whenever Nicole is absent. His denial grows increasingly severe as he insists he remains in complete control despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Nicole becomes heartbroken as she watches the man she loves repeatedly choose alcohol over honesty, recovery, and their future together. Meanwhile, First Officer Ken Evans finally awakens from his coma. Whip visits him in the hospital and learns that Evans has suffered permanent spinal damage that will prevent him from ever flying again. Overcome by fear regarding the upcoming investigation, Whip subtly asks Evans whether he would tell investigators that Whip appeared sober before the flight. Evans is visibly hurt by the request, fully aware that Whip had been intoxicated while commanding the aircraft. Nevertheless, rather than exposing him, Evans refuses to testify against Whip. He tells him that he believes divine intervention placed Whip in the cockpit because no one else possessed the extraordinary flying ability necessary to save 96 lives that morning. Evans' compassion only deepens Whip's guilt, forcing him to confront the painful contradiction between his incredible heroism and his reckless diction. Eventually Nicole discovers hidden bottles of alcohol throughout the farmhouse and realizes that Whip has been lying to her from the beginning. After another emotional confrontation, she tells him that she cannot continue sacrificing her own sobriety in an environment dominated by addiction and deception. Despite desperately wanting to help him, Nicole accepts that genuine recovery cannot begin until Whip chooses honesty for himself. She quietly packs her belongings and leaves the farmhouse, ending their relationship and leaving Whip completely alone with his addiction. Emotionally devastated, Whip spirals into an even darker period of depression, isolation, and self-destruction. Consumed by guilt over the life he has wasted, Whip visits the suburban home of his estranged ex-wife, Deanna, and their teenage son, Will Jr. Years of alcoholism, broken promises, infidelity, and emotional neglect have destroyed his family relationships, and neither his former wife nor his son is prepared to welcome him back. Whip realizes that the damage he has caused extends far beyond the airplane crash, affecting everyone who has ever cared about him. The rejection reinforces the painful reality that redemption will require more than simply surviving the accident. It will require complete honesty and lasting personal transformation. As the official National Transportation Safety Board hearing approaches, public fascination with the crash intensifies. News organizations continue portraying Whip as a heroic pilot while simultaneously questioning rumors surrounding his personal conduct. Concerned that Whip might relapse before testifying, Charlie Anderson and Hugh Lang place him in a guarded hotel suite under constant supervision, removing every possible source of alcohol. Throughout the night, Whip struggles through agonizing withdrawal symptoms, including sweating, shaking, hallucinations, anxiety, and overwhelming cravings. Just as he appears ready to endure the ordeal, he accidentally discovers that the adjoining hotel room has been left unlocked and contains a fully stocked minibar. After a prolonged internal battle, he finally surrenders to temptation, consuming bottle after bottle of liquor until he collapses unconscious on the floor surrounded by empty bottles. The following morning, Charlie discovers Whip in an intoxicated and nearly unconscious state only hours before the NTSB hearing is scheduled to begin. Faced with disaster, Harling Mays arrives carrying cocaine and persuades Whip to inhale several lines in order to counteract the alcohol and restore his alertness. The dangerous combination temporarily revives him, allowing Whip to appear outwardly composed as he enters the hearing room. During the hearing, NTSB lead investigator Ellen Block presents the board's exhaustive findings. Extensive technical analysis confirms beyond doubt that the accident resulted entirely from an unforeseeable mechanical failure within the aircraft's elevator control system rather than pilot negligence. Multiple highly experienced test pilots had attempted to recreate the emergency in sophisticated flight simulators, yet none succeeded in safely landing the aircraft. The evidence leaves no question that Whip's extraordinary piloting skills saved 96 lives. However, investigators also revealed that 2 empty vodka bottles were recovered from the aircraft's trash compartment. Because Whip's hospital toxicology report has been ruled legally inadmissible, The only crew member officially identified as having consumed alcohol before the flight is the deceased flight attendant Katerina M. Marquez. Initially, Whip remains silent as everyone expects him to deny responsibility and allow suspicion to remain focused on Katerina, who can no longer defend herself. The realization that he is about to destroy the reputation of a woman who died heroically saving a child finally overwhelms him. Unable to continue living behind lies and excuses, Whip breaks down emotionally before the hearing panel. He publicly admits that the vodka belonged to him, not Katerina, and confesses that he had consumed large quantities of alcohol and cocaine before taking command of Flight 227. He further reveals that he is still intoxicated because he spent the previous night drinking in his hotel room. His stunning confession instantly destroys the carefully constructed legal defense but liberates him from years of denial, deception, and self-delusion. For the first time in his life, Whip chooses truth over self-preservation. 13 months later, Whip is serving a 5-year federal prison sentence. Although he has lost his career, freedom, reputation, and future as an airline pilot, he has finally achieved genuine sobriety and inner peace. Inside prison, he regularly addresses addiction recovery groups, openly sharing his experiences and encouraging fellow inmates to confront their own addictions through honesty and accountability. Rather than viewing imprisonment solely as punishment, Whip comes to see it as the beginning of his true recovery. His willingness to accept responsibility has also allowed him to slowly rebuild relationships with Nicole and his estranged son. During one prison visit, Will Jr., now preparing a college admissions essay about his father, asks him a simple but deeply philosophical question: "Who are you?" After pausing thoughtfully, Whip smiles and replies, "That's a good question." As an airplane flies peacefully overhead, the film concludes on a powerful note of redemption, suggesting that although Whip has sacrificed everything, he has finally discovered the truth about himself and begun the long journey toward forgiveness, personal responsibility, and lasting redemption. The cast of Flight is led by Academy Award-winning actor Denzel Washington, who delivers one of the most acclaimed performances of his career as Captain William Whip Whitaker Sr., a veteran commercial airline captain with decades of flying experience and an exceptional reputation for professionalism and technical skill. Beneath his confident exterior, however, Whip is secretly consumed by severe alcoholism and cocaine addiction, living a double life that eventually threatens to destroy both his career and his personal relationships. After successfully performing an almost impossible emergency landing following a catastrophic mechanical failure aboard South Jet Flight 227, Whip is celebrated across the nation as a hero whose extraordinary piloting skills saved 96 of the 102 people on board. However, the subsequent National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) investigation uncovers evidence that he was intoxicated while flying the aircraft, forcing him to confront the devastating consequences of years of denial, deception, and substance abuse. Washington's deeply emotional and psychologically complex portrayal captures every aspect of Whip's internal conflict, balancing moments of extraordinary courage with heartbreaking vulnerability and self-destruction. His performance was universally praised by critics and earned nominations for the Academy Award for Best Actor, Golden Globe Award, Screen Actors Guild Award, Critics' Choice Movie Award, Satellite Award, NAACP Image Award, and numerous regional critics associations, with many reviewers considering it among the finest performances of his distinguished career. Academy Award nominee Don Cheadle portrays Hugh Lang, an accomplished aviation defense attorney retained by the airline and the pilots' union to defend Whip throughout the federal investigation and any potential legal proceedings. Calm, intelligent, and exceptionally strategic, Lang is renowned for his ability to exploit legal loopholes and procedural technicalities in order to protect his clients. Throughout the film, he carefully constructs a legal defense designed to shield Whip from criminal prosecution despite knowing the damaging implications of the toxicology report. While remaining professionally committed to defending his client, Lang increasingly finds himself challenged by Whip's unpredictable behavior, repeated relapses, and inability to remain sober. His character represents the legal system's complex relationship with truth, responsibility, and advocacy, serving as both Whip's protector and a witness to his gradual emotional collapse. British actress Kelly Reilly delivers a deeply compassionate performance as Nicole Megan, a recovering heroin addict whose life unexpectedly becomes intertwined with Whip's after both are admitted to the same hospital. Nicole has spent years battling addiction and desperately wants to reclaim her life through sobriety, honesty, and emotional healing. Her determination to remain clean stands in stark contrast to Whip's continued denial of his alcoholism. As the relationship develops into a romance, Nicole becomes the emotional center of the film, offering Whip genuine love, understanding, and hope for redemption. She repeatedly encourages him to attend recovery meetings, confront the truth about his addiction, and seek professional help before his destructive behavior destroys everything around him. Despite her deep affection for Whip, Nicole ultimately realizes that no one can save an addict who refuses to acknowledge the existence of the problem, making her departure one of the film's most emotionally devastating moments. Her character symbolizes hope, recovery, forgiveness, and the difficult realization that true change must come from within. Academy Award winner John Goodman delivers one of the film's most memorable supporting performances as Harling Mays, Whip's longtime friend, drug supplier, and self-proclaimed pharmaceutical consultant. Loud, charismatic, eccentric, and frequently humorous, Harling provides comic relief while simultaneously representing the constant temptation that fuels Whip's addiction. Rather than encouraging recovery, Harling continually enables Whip's alcoholism and drug dependency by supplying him with cocaine, alcohol, prescription medications, and other substances whenever he requests them. His carefree attitude towards substance abuse contrasts sharply with the film's otherwise serious tone, making his appearances both entertaining and deeply unsettling. Harling's most pivotal moment occurs shortly before the NTSB hearing, when he administers cocaine to revive an intoxicated Whip so that he can appear coherent enough to testify. Although intended to save Whip's legal case, Harling's actions ultimately contribute to the emotional circumstances leading to Whip's public confession. Veteran actor Bruce Greenwood portrays Charlie Anderson, the representative of the airline pilots union and one of Whip's oldest, most trusted, and most loyal friends. Charlie firmly believes that Whip's remarkable flying abilities saved dozens of lives and remains determined to protect both his professional reputation and personal future. Acting as mediator between the airline, the union, attorneys, investigators, and Whip himself, Charlie coordinates legal representation, manages public relations, and repeatedly attempts to help Whip maintain sobriety before the official hearing. Throughout the story, Charlie becomes increasingly frustrated and heartbroken as he watches his longtime friend repeatedly sabotage every opportunity to rebuild his life. His unwavering loyalty illustrates the difficult emotional burden carried by those attempting to help loved ones suffering from addiction. Brian Garrity portrays First Officer Ken Evans, Whip's capable and conscientious co-pilot aboard Southjet Flight 227. During the catastrophic in-flight emergency, Evans works alongside Whip in a desperate effort to regain control of the aircraft despite overwhelming mechanical failure. Although he survives the crash, Evans sustains devastating spinal injuries that permanently end his career as a commercial airline pilot. Despite knowing that Whip had consumed alcohol before the flight, Evans refuses to testify against him, believing that divine intervention placed Whip in command because no other pilot could have accomplished such an extraordinary emergency landing. His compassion and moral integrity serve as an important counterbalance to Whip's overwhelming guilt, emphasizing themes of forgiveness, faith, and destiny. Veteran actress Tamara Tooney appears as Margaret Thomason, the representative of the flight attendants union. Margaret works closely with investigators throughout the aftermath of the disaster, advocating for the interests of the surviving cabin crew while ensuring that the deceased flight attendants receive fair and respectful treatment during the investigation. She also becomes involved in discussions regarding the alcohol found aboard the aircraft and the potential damage to Katerina Marquez's reputation. Academy Award winner Melissa Leo portrays Ellen Block, the highly respected lead investigator for the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, intelligent, methodical, and unwaveringly committed to uncovering the truth. Block directs the official investigation into South Jet Flight 227 by analyzing cockpit recordings, flight data, aircraft wreckage, engineering reports, toxicology evidence, and flight simulation results. Her professional objectivity allows her to recognize both the extraordinary heroism demonstrated by Whip during the emergency and the troubling evidence suggesting serious misconduct before the flight. During the climactic hearing, Block's calm but persistent questioning ultimately forces Whip to confront the truth about his actions, making her one of the film's most important catalysts for his eventual redemption. Nadine Velasquez portrays Katerina Trina Marquez, a compassionate flight attendant assigned to South Jet Flight 227 who spends the evening before the flight with Whip. Although their relationship appears casual, Katerina genuinely cares about him despite recognizing his destructive lifestyle. During the crash, she heroically sacrifices her own life while shielding a young passenger from the impact, becoming one of the disaster's victims. Following the accident, investigators initially conclude that the vodka bottles recovered aboard the aircraft belonged to Katerina, placing her reputation in jeopardy despite her inability to defend herself. The possibility of allowing blame to fall upon her memory ultimately becomes the moral breaking point that compels Whip to publicly confess the truth. Veteran actor Peter Reilly portrays Abington Carr, the chairman responsible for presiding over the official National Transportation Safety Board hearing. Professional, impartial, and authoritative, Carr oversees the legal proceedings and supervises the testimony presented by investigators, attorneys, and witnesses. His hearing ultimately becomes the setting for Whip's emotional confession and acceptance of responsibility. Garcelle Beauvais portrays Deanna Coleman, Whip's estranged former wife. Years of alcoholism, infidelity, broken promises, emotional neglect, and irresponsible behavior have irreparably damaged their marriage, leaving Deanna determined to protect both herself and their son from further disappointment. Although her role is relatively limited, Deanna's presence highlights the devastating personal consequences of addiction beyond the immediate events of the airplane crash. Boni Yanagisawa appears as Camellia Satu, an investigator working alongside Ellen Block during the NTSB inquiry. She assists in examining technical evidence, reviewing flight data, and preparing the official findings presented during the hearing. Justin Martin portrays Will Whitaker Jr., Whip and Deanna's teenage son. Having spent much of his childhood disappointed by his father's alcoholism and repeated failures, Will grows emotionally distant from him and initially refuses reconciliation. By the conclusion of the film, however, Whip's honesty and acceptance of responsibility allow father and son to cautiously begin rebuilding their relationship. His final conversation with Whip in prison provides one of the film's most powerful emotional moments and symbolizes the possibility of forgiveness. James Badgedale portrays the gaunt young man, a terminally ill cancer patient whom Nicole meets while recovering in the hospital. Although appearing only briefly, his thoughtful conversations about mortality, acceptance, spirituality, and the meaning of life profoundly influenced Nicole's determination to remain sober and continue moving forward despite overwhelming hardship. His character serves as an important philosophical counterpoint to Whip's continuing denial. British broadcaster and television journalist Piers Morgan makes a cameo appearance as himself, appearing in television news broadcasts discussing the South Jet Flight 227 disaster, Whip's heroic reputation, and the growing public debate surrounding the ongoing federal investigation. The film's supporting cast further enriches its realistic portrayal of the aviation industry, media scrutiny, and legal investigation. Roger Mitchell portrays Craig Matson, an airline executive responsible for coordinating with investigators following the accident and protecting the airline's interests during the inquiry. Ravi Kapoor appears as Dr. Keenan, one of the physicians overseeing Whip's treatment and recovery following the crash. Sarah Clarke and Vinnie Hassan provide the voices of radio talk show hosts, whose broadcasts reflect changing public opinion as details surrounding the accident emerge. Academy Award-winning sound designer Randy Tam voices a radio stock market reporter, illustrating the broader economic repercussions of the airline disaster. Dennis P. Wise and Paul Vall portray air traffic controllers, voices, communicating with Flight 227 during the emergency sequence, enhancing the authenticity of the aviation scenes. Hal Williams provides the voice of Whip's late father, heard during reflective moments that hint at Whip's emotional past, while Kwesi Boke voices young Will Whitaker, appearing in childhood memories that underscore the years of fatherhood Whip sacrificed because of his addiction. Collectively, the ensemble cast delivers powerful, emotionally authentic performances that strengthen the film's exploration of addiction, heroism, guilt, accountability, family, forgiveness, and redemption, elevating Flight into one of the most compelling character-driven dramas of the decade. Development of Flight officially gained momentum in April 2011, when Academy Award-winning filmmaker Robert Zemeckis entered negotiations with Paramount Pictures to direct the project from an original screenplay written by John Gatins. The film represented a pivotal turning point in Zemeckis' career, as it marked his long-awaited return to traditional live-action filmmaking after spending more than a decade pioneering performance capture technology with films such as The Polar Express, 2004, Beowulf, 2007, and A Christmas Carol, 2009. Before Flight, Zemeckis had not directed a live-action feature since the critically acclaimed Castaway and supernatural thriller What Lies Beneath, both released in 2000. During the intervening years, Zemeckis became one of Hollywood's strongest advocates for motion capture filmmaking through his Image Movers digital studio, but after the commercial disappointment of Mars Needs Moms, 2011, and the closure of the studio, he sought to return to more intimate, character-driven storytelling. When presented with John Gatins' screenplay, Zemeckis was immediately drawn not to the spectacular airplane crash that opens the film, but to the deeply flawed and morally ambiguous central character of Captain William Whip Whitaker. He viewed the screenplay as a powerful psychological drama exploring addiction, guilt, morality, truth, responsibility, and redemption rather than a conventional aviation disaster film. The emotional complexity of the material convinced him that the story could resonate with audiences through its human drama as much as its technical spectacle. By early June 2011, Zemeckis officially accepted the directing assignment, while two-time Academy Award winner Denzel Washington simultaneously entered final negotiations to portray Whip Whitaker. Flight would become the first collaboration between Washington and Zemeckis, bringing together two of Hollywood's most respected talents for the first time. Once the principal creative team was assembled, casting progressed rapidly throughout the latter half of 2011. In September, British actress Kelly Reilly entered negotiations to portray Nicole Megan, a recovering heroin addict whose relationship with Whip becomes central to the film's emotional narrative. Reilly was selected because of her ability to portray both vulnerability and emotional resilience, qualities essential to Nicole's role as someone genuinely striving toward recovery while attempting to help another addict unwilling to acknowledge his illness. Shortly afterward, Academy Award nominee Don Cheadle joined the production as accomplished aviation attorney Hugh Lang, while Bruce Greenwood was cast as Charlie Anderson, Whip's loyal friend and representative of the Airline Pilots Union. Academy Award winner John Goodman also signed on to portray Harling Mays, Whip's eccentric drug supplier and drinking companion whose flamboyant personality provides moments of dark humor while symbolizing the constant temptation of addiction. Later that month, Academy Award-winning actress Melissa Leo entered final negotiations to portray National Transportation Safety Board investigator Ellen Block, whose relentless professionalism drives the official investigation into the crash. James Badgedale was cast as the mysterious terminally ill hospital patient known as the Gaunt Young Man, a small but philosophically significant role. The ensemble was further strengthened by the addition of Brian Garrity, Tamara Tooney, Nadine Velasquez, Peter Zarity, Garcelle Beauvais, Justin Martin, Boni Yanagisawa, E. Roger Mitchell, Ravi Kapoor, and numerous experienced character actors. Zemeckis intentionally assembled a cast composed primarily of accomplished dramatic performers rather than major box office stars, believing their naturalistic acting styles would reinforce the film's emotional authenticity and mature tone. Screenwriter John Gatins had spent several years developing the screenplay before production commenced. Rather than writing a traditional disaster movie focused on spectacular action, Gayton's conceived Flight as an intimate character study in which the aviation accident merely serves as the catalyst for a much larger story about addiction, denial, accountability, and redemption. He deliberately created Captain Whitaker as an extraordinarily complicated protagonist, a man capable of simultaneously committing one of the gravest violations imaginable by piloting a commercial airliner while intoxicated, yet also performing one of the greatest acts of heroism by saving 96 lives through extraordinary flying skill. Gayton has frequently described the screenplay as an exploration of moral contradiction, asking audiences to consider whether heroic actions can coexist with deeply unethical behavior. Instead of offering simple answers, the screenplay continually challenges viewers to question ideas of heroism, justice, forgiveness, and personal responsibility. According to Gayton's, the crash sequence was never intended to be the climax of the film but rather the event that forces Whip into confronting truths he had spent years avoiding. This focus on emotional consequences rather than spectacle distinguished Flight from virtually every other aviation drama produced by a major Hollywood studio. Principal photography officially commenced during October 2011. With the majority of filming taking place over an intensive 45-day shooting schedule throughout November and December 2011. The production was based almost entirely in Atlanta, Georgia, which had rapidly become one of North America's leading filmmaking hubs because of its generous tax incentives, diverse filming locations, and expanding production infrastructure. Numerous neighborhoods, highways, office buildings, hospitals, hotels, airports, courtrooms, and rural locations throughout the Atlanta metropolitan area doubled for Orlando, Atlanta, and several fictional settings appearing throughout the film. The production also utilized soundstages and production facilities that later became known as Trilith Studios, formerly Pinewood Atlanta Studios, where elaborate cockpit sets, aircraft interiors, courtroom environments, and visual effects sequences were constructed. Filming in Georgia not only significantly reduced production expenses but also allowed the filmmakers to complete the ambitious project within their remarkably short schedule without compromising technical quality. One of the production's most remarkable achievements was completing the entire film on a modest budget of approximately $31 million, an unusually low figure for a Robert Zemeckis feature. Zemeckis himself later remarked that, after adjusting for inflation, Flight represented the least expensive film he had directed since Used Cars, 1980. Achieving such a restrained budget required careful financial planning, efficient scheduling, and significant personal sacrifices by the filmmakers. Both Robert Zemeckis and Denzel Washington agreed to accept substantially reduced upfront salaries in exchange for back-end profit participation, enabling more of the available budget to be invested directly into production design, practical effects, visual effects, aviation sequences, and supporting cast members. Georgia's generous film tax credits further reduced production costs, making it financially possible to produce a technically ambitious aviation drama without requiring blockbuster-level financing. The relatively modest budget also encouraged Zemeckis to focus on intimate storytelling, allowing character development and emotional authenticity to remain the film's highest priorities rather than expensive action sequences. Perhaps the greatest technical challenge facing the production was creating the spectacular airplane accident that dominates the film's opening act. From the earliest stages of pre-production, Zemeckis insisted that the sequence feel as realistic and technically accurate as possible. Rather than relying primarily on computer-generated imagery, he sought to combine practical filmmaking techniques with carefully integrated visual effects in order to immerse audiences in the terrifying experience of a real aviation disaster. To accomplish this, the production hired Scraggins Aviation Mock-Up Effects, one of the industry's leading specialists in aircraft props and aviation special effects. The company supplied 3 retired McDonnell Douglas MD-80 series aircraft, which became the primary physical representations of South Jet Flight 227 throughout production. Additional decommissioned MD-80 airframes were used to construct highly detailed passenger cabins, cockpit interiors, cargo compartments, and exterior fuselage sections. Many of these full-scale aircraft components were mounted on sophisticated hydraulic gimbal systems capable of rotating, shaking, tilting, and even turning completely upside down, allowing actors to perform inside realistically moving environments during the emergency sequence. These elaborate practical sets enabled Zemeckis to capture genuine physical reactions from the performers while creating one of the most convincing aviation disaster sequences ever filmed. To maximize authenticity, the filmmakers collaborated extensively with experienced commercial airline pilots, aviation engineers, aircraft mechanics, Federal Aviation Administration consultants, flight instructors, air traffic control specialists, and technical advisors familiar with airline operations. Every cockpit procedure, flight checklist, instrument display, radio transmission, emergency command, and crew interaction underwent detailed research to ensure technical accuracy. Denzel Washington also participated in cockpit familiarization sessions and aviation instruction to better understand airline procedures, cockpit resource management, and pilot communication techniques. Zemeckis emphasized that even though audiences might not consciously recognize every technical detail, professional pilots and aviation experts should immediately recognize that the production had treated aviation with respect and realism. This commitment to authenticity became one of the defining characteristics of the finished film. Although Flight tells a completely fictional story, John Gatins revealed in interviews that its opening aviation disaster was loosely inspired by the real-life crash of Alaska Airlines Flight 261, which occurred on January 31, 2000. That tragedy involved a McDonnell Douglas MD-83 whose horizontal stabilizer jack screw assembly catastrophically failed after inadequate lubrication caused excessive wear. The resulting elevator failure left pilots Captain Ted Thompson and First Officer Bill Tansky struggling heroically to regain control of the aircraft. During the desperate final moments of the flight, the pilots briefly succeeded in flying the airplane upside down, an unprecedented maneuver for a commercial jet in an attempt to stabilize the aircraft before it ultimately plunged into the Pacific Ocean, killing all 88 people aboard. Gatins explained that the remarkable courage and professionalism demonstrated by the flight crew deeply affected him, particularly the haunting cockpit voice recorder in which Captain Thompson declared, "Okay, we are inverted. We're flying. Tell them what we're doing. At least upside down we're flying." This extraordinary moment inspired Whip Whittaker's daring decision to invert South Jet Flight 227 during the fictional emergency. However, Gatins consistently emphasized that Flight is not based on Alaska Airlines Flight 261, nor is it intended to dramatize the actual disaster. The film's characters, airline, investigation, legal proceedings, and narrative remain entirely fictional. Even so, numerous technical aspects of the real accident influenced the design of the fictional emergency. Like Alaska Airlines Flight 261, South Jet Flight 227 experiences catastrophic elevator control failure that renders normal flight virtually impossible. The fictional aircraft is visually modeled after the McDonnell Douglas MD-80 family, the same aircraft family involved in the real disaster, complete with its distinctive T-tail configuration and rear-mounted engines. Various cockpit procedures, engineering terminology, radio communications, aircraft systems, and elements of the accident investigation were similarly inspired by real aviation practices and official accident reports. The screenplay also incorporates the famous inverted flight maneuver, though it imagines a dramatically different outcome in which an extraordinarily skilled pilot successfully lands the crippled aircraft, allowing the narrative to explore the legal, emotional, and psychological aftermath of survival rather than ending with tragedy. Visual effects supervisor Kevin Bailey and his team worked closely with Zemeckis to seamlessly integrate practical photography with digital enhancements throughout the production. Computer-generated imagery was employed primarily to extend physical aircraft sets, create realistic environmental conditions, enhance the surrounding landscapes, simulate structural failures, and safely depict the aircraft's catastrophic descent without sacrificing realism. Unlike many modern disaster films, Flight deliberately avoided overwhelming audiences with excessive digital spectacle. Instead, Visual effects were designed to remain largely invisible, supporting rather than replacing practical filmmaking. Miniatures, motion control photography, digital compositing, environmental simulations, and carefully designed sound effects were combined to produce a disaster sequence praised by both critics and aviation professionals for its extraordinary realism. Academy Award-winning sound designer Randy Tom supervised an intricate soundscape incorporating authentic cockpit warnings, engine failures, airframe stress noises, wind turbulence, radio communications, and environmental effects that significantly enhanced the emotional intensity of the sequence. Ultimately, Robert Zemeckis approached Flight not as an action spectacle but as an emotionally driven character drama that happened to begin with one of cinema's most technically accomplished aviation sequences. Throughout production, he consistently reminded cast and crew that the airplane crash was only the story's opening act rather than its central purpose. The true narrative focused on addiction, guilt, denial, honesty, accountability, forgiveness, and the painful journey toward redemption undertaken by Captain Whip Whitaker. By combining exceptional performances, authentic aviation procedures, meticulous technical craftsmanship, practical filmmaking techniques, restrained visual effects, and mature storytelling, the filmmakers created a film that distinguished itself from conventional disaster movies. Upon its release, Flight was widely praised not only for its breathtaking crash sequence but also for its emotional depth, moral complexity, and thoughtful exploration of human weakness, ultimately becoming one of the most critically acclaimed and commercially successful adult dramas of 2012. Flight made its world premiere at the prestigious 50th New York Film Festival on October 14, 2012, where it served as one of the festival's most anticipated gala presentations. The screening marked Robert Zemeckis' first live-action feature in 12 years and generated considerable excitement among critics, filmmakers, and award-season observers eager to see the acclaimed director return to dramatic filmmaking after a lengthy period devoted to performance capture animation. The premiere was attended by director Robert Zemeckis, screenwriter John Gatins, producers Walter F. Parks, Laurie MacDonald, Steve Starkey, Jack Rapp, and members of the principal cast, including Denzel Washington, Kelly Reilly, Don Cheadle, John Goodman, Bruce Greenwood, Melissa Leo, and several supporting performers. Following the screening, the film received an enthusiastic response from attendees, with critics offering early praise for its emotionally complex narrative, technically breathtaking opening airplane crash sequence, and, above all, Denzel Washington's extraordinary lead performance. Many reviewers immediately identified Washington as a major contender for the upcoming Academy Awards, while also welcoming Zemeckis' confident return to live-action filmmaking after more than a decade away from the format. Following its successful festival debut, Flight was released theatrically across the United States and Canada on November 2, 2012. By Paramount Pictures. The film carried an R rating from the Motion Picture Association for its depiction of drug use, alcoholism, language, and mature thematic material, making it a distinctly adult-oriented drama aimed primarily at mature audiences rather than the broad family demographic typically associated with aviation-themed films. Running for 138 minutes, the film opened in 1,884 theaters throughout North America, including conventional digital engagements and select IMAX locations that showcased its spectacular airplane crash sequence on premium large-format screens. The release represented one of Paramount's major prestige titles for the fall award season, positioning the film to capitalize on strong critical reception while appealing to audiences seeking sophisticated, character-driven dramas. Its release also marked Robert Zemeckis' first theatrical live-action feature since Castaway and What Lies Beneath in 2000, making the film a significant event in the director's career. Paramount Pictures launched an extensive marketing campaign that deliberately emphasized the film's emotional and psychological depth rather than presenting it solely as an aviation disaster thriller. Promotional trailers initially highlighted the terrifying emergency landing aboard South Jet Flight 227, using the spectacular crash sequence to capture audience attention, but they also focused heavily on the moral and personal consequences faced by Captain William Whittaker after the accident. Television spots, theatrical trailers, posters, and online promotional materials consistently showcased Denzel Washington's powerful performance while stressing the film's themes of addiction, accountability, redemption, and truth. Rather than revealing the full nature of the story, the marketing campaign encouraged audiences to question whether Whitt was a hero, a criminal, or both simultaneously. Paramount also promoted the film heavily during the awards season, arranging advanced screenings for critics, guild organizations, and awards voters while highlighting Washington's performance as one of the year's strongest dramatic portrayals. Interviews with Robert Zemeckis and the cast further emphasized that Flight was fundamentally a character study disguised as an aviation thriller, helping distinguish it from more conventional disaster films. Upon its wide theatrical release, Flight exceeded virtually all pre-release industry expectations at the North American box office. During its opening weekend, the film earned approximately $24.9 million, averaging an impressive $13,217 per theater from 1,884 locations, and debuted in second place at the domestic box office behind Disney's animated comedy Wreck-It Ralph. For an original, R-rated adult drama without franchise recognition or superhero branding, the opening was widely regarded as an outstanding commercial performance. Industry analysts credited the film's strong debut to several factors, including Denzel Washington's enduring popularity, Robert Zemeckis' reputation as one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers, the film's outstanding reviews, and widespread curiosity generated by the highly publicized airplane crash sequence. The opening weekend also demonstrated that audiences remained willing to support mature, original dramas when anchored by compelling storytelling and major star power. Unlike many studio releases that experienced steep declines following their opening weekends, Flight displayed remarkable staying power throughout its theatrical run. Positive reviews from critics, enthusiastic audience word of mouth, and Washington's widely acclaimed performance contributed to exceptionally strong legs at the box office. Adult audiences, in particular, continued discovering the film throughout the awards season, while repeat viewings were encouraged by discussions surrounding the film's morally ambiguous protagonist and emotionally powerful conclusion. The film benefited from relatively limited direct competition within the adult drama market, allowing it to remain a consistent performer over several weeks. As awards nominations began to emerge during late 2012 and early 2013, renewed media attention further strengthened its commercial longevity, with many moviegoers seeking out the film after hearing widespread praise for Washington's performance. By the conclusion of its domestic theatrical run, Flight had grossed approximately $93.8 million in the United States and Canada, an exceptional result for a dialogue-driven adult drama with a relatively modest production budget. Internationally, Paramount gradually expanded the film into major overseas markets across Europe, Asia, Australia, and Latin America, where it generated an additional approximately $68.0 million. Combining domestic and international receipts, Flight achieved a worldwide box office total of approximately $161.8 million, making it one of the year's most profitable original dramatic films. Considering its restrained $31 million production budget, the film earned more than 5 times its production cost at the global box office before accounting for ancillary revenue streams such as home entertainment, television licensing, and digital distribution. The film's impressive financial performance reaffirmed the commercial viability of intelligent, character-driven dramas led by established stars and accomplished filmmakers, even during an era increasingly dominated by blockbuster franchises. Financial analysts widely regarded Flight as one of Paramount Pictures' strongest adult-oriented releases of 2012. Its profitability was attributed not only to its efficient production budget but also to the strategic marketing campaign that successfully balanced the excitement of the aviation disaster with the emotional complexity of the story. Denzel Washington's international appeal, Robert Zemeckis' reputation for technically accomplished filmmaking, and overwhelmingly positive critical reviews all contributed to sustain audience interest. The film also benefited from awards season visibility, with Washington's Best Actor campaign generating additional publicity that extended its theatrical lifespan well beyond its opening weeks. Strong audience satisfaction further translated into excellent word of mouth, allowing the film to maintain healthy weekly grosses despite competition from larger studio releases. Following its successful theatrical run, Flight entered the home entertainment market through Blu-ray disc, DVD, digital HD, video on-demand services, and later streaming platforms. The home media editions featured high-definition presentations of the film along with several bonus features, including behind-the-scenes documentaries exploring Robert Zemeckis' return to live-action filmmaking, the creation of the spectacular airplane crash sequence, visual effects production, aviation research, and interviews with the cast and crew discussing the film's central themes. These releases introduced the film to an even broader audience while generating substantial additional revenue beyond its theatrical earnings. Television broadcasts, premium cable licensing, and digital streaming services further expanded the film's long-term viewership, helping establish Flight as one of the defining adult dramas of the early 2010s. More than a decade after its initial theatrical release, Flight continues to be regarded as one of Robert Zemeckis' finest live-action films and one of the standout American dramas of 2012. Its release marked not only a successful comeback for Zemeckis as a live-action director but also one of the most celebrated performances of Denzel Washington's career. The film's combination of spectacular technical filmmaking, emotionally rich performances, mature storytelling, and thought-provoking exploration of addiction, accountability, heroism, and redemption has ensured its enduring reputation among critics, filmmakers, aviation enthusiasts, and audiences alike. Both its critical acclaim and strong commercial performance demonstrated that sophisticated, character-focused dramas could still achieve significant success in the modern theatrical marketplace, cementing Flight as both an artistic and financial triumph for everyone involved in its production. Flight received a strongly positive critical response, with widespread acclaim directed toward Robert Zemeckis' successful return to live-action filmmaking, John Gaden's screenplay, the film's mature exploration of addiction and personal accountability, and especially Denzel Washington's acclaimed lead performance as airline captain William Whitaker. After spending much of the previous decade focused on motion capture animation projects such as The Polar Express, 2004, Beowulf, 2007, and A Christmas Carol, 2009. Zemeckis' return to a grounded adult drama was viewed by many critics as a major artistic comeback. Reviewers praised the director for using the framework of an aviation disaster thriller not simply to create suspense, but as a foundation for a deeply personal character study examining alcoholism, denial, guilt, responsibility, faith, and the difficult process of redemption. Critics frequently noted that Flight avoided becoming a traditional disaster film despite featuring one of the most intense and technically impressive airplane sequences in modern cinema. Instead of focusing primarily on the mechanics of the crash or the investigation that follows, the film shifted its attention toward the psychological consequences faced by Whitaker, a talented but self-destructive pilot whose heroic actions during an emergency are complicated by his hidden battle with substance abuse. Many reviewers highlighted the film's central moral question, whether a person can be considered a hero for saving lives while still being responsible for the damage caused by their personal failures. The complexity of this conflict was considered one of the film's greatest strengths. On the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, Flight holds an approval rating of 77% based on 239 critic reviews, with a weighted average score of 6.90. The website's critical consensus states, Robert Zemeckis makes a triumphant return to live-action cinema with Flight, a thoughtful and provocative character study propelled by a compelling performance from Denzel Washington. Critics generally agreed that although certain elements of the film, particularly its legal proceedings, rehabilitation storyline, and themes of personal recovery, followed familiar dramatic structures, the movie was elevated by its emotional depth, strong performances, and willingness to present a morally complicated protagonist. Many reviewers emphasized that Whip Whitaker was neither portrayed as a simple hero nor a villain, but as a flawed individual whose courage, arrogance, compassion, and denial exist simultaneously. On Metacritic, Flight received a weighted score of 76 out of 100 based on 40 professional reviews, indicating generally favorable reviews. Critics praised Zemeckis' confident direction, Gaydens's screenplay, the film's serious tone, and its ability to balance a spectacular opening disaster sequence with quieter moments of emotional introspection. Many reviewers appreciated that the film used the airplane crash merely as the starting point for a larger examination of human weakness and moral responsibility, rather than becoming a conventional thriller about aviation survival. Flight was recognized as a character-driven drama about addiction, honesty, and the painful consequences of refusing to acknowledge one's own problems. Audience reactions were also highly positive. Moviegoers surveyed by CinemaScore awarded the film an average grade of an A+ to F scale, reflecting strong audience approval of the performances, emotional impact, and overall entertainment value. Viewers particularly responded to the film's suspenseful opening sequence, Washington's commanding performance, and the emotional journey of Whip as he struggles between protecting his public image and accepting responsibility for his actions. The most consistent element of critical praise was Denzel Washington's performance, which many critics considered one of the strongest and most complex performances of his career. Reviewers admired Washington's ability to portray Whip Whitaker as a deeply contradictory character, a brilliant pilot capable of extraordinary bravery in moments of crisis, yet a man trapped by years of alcoholism, dishonesty, and self-destructive behavior. Rather than making Whip traditionally sympathetic, Washington allowed the character's charm and vulnerability to exist alongside his arrogance and irresponsibility, creating a portrait of a person whose flaws are impossible to ignore but whose humanity remains visible. Todd McCarthy of The Hollywood Reporter praised Washington's performance as one of the actor's richest and most layered roles, stating that the film provides Denzel Washington with one of his meatiest, most complex roles, and he flies with it. Many critics echoed the sentiment, arguing that Washington transformed what could have been a conventional addiction drama into a powerful psychological study. His performance was widely regarded as the emotional foundation of the film, carrying the story through moments of triumph, denial, fear, anger, and eventual self-reflection. Film critic Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave Flight a perfect 4 out of 4 stars, describing it as an outstanding showcase for Washington and calling his performance one of his very best. Ebert praised the film for following Whip's difficult emotional journey while maintaining a careful balance between understanding the character and holding him accountable. He particularly highlighted the film's opening airplane disaster sequence, describing it as one of the most terrifying flight scenes I've ever witnessed. Ebert admired the sequence for combining technical realism, suspense, and emotional intensity, while also emphasizing that the true purpose of the scene was to establish the contradiction at the center of Whip's character, a man capable of saving hundreds of lives while being unable to save himself. Ebert considered Flight nearly flawless and later ranked it as the 6th best film of 2012 on his annual list. He also argued that the film deserved recognition among the year's Best Picture contenders, despite not receiving an Academy Award nomination in that category. His review emphasized that the film succeeded because it was not simply about an airplane crash, but about a man being forced into a confrontation with the truth he had spent years avoiding. Other major publications similarly praised Washington's performance and the film's emotional intensity. Entertainment Weekly highlighted the complexity of Washington's portrayal of an alcoholic pilot whose heroic actions become overshadowed by his personal struggles. Critics praised the contrast between Whip's extraordinary ability to handle a life-threatening emergency and his inability to control his own destructive habits. The performance earned Washington an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, further confirming the widespread critical consensus that his portrayal was the defining achievement of the film. The film also received recognition for its supporting cast, particularly John Goodman as Whip's friend and drug supplier Harling Mays, and Kelly Reilly as Nicole Megan, a recovering addict who struggles parallel Whip's own battle with denial. Critics noted that these supporting performances helped strengthen the film's exploration of addiction by presenting recovery as a difficult, ongoing process rather than a simple transformation. Despite the overwhelmingly positive response, Flight also faced criticism, especially from aviation professionals who questioned the accuracy of its depiction of airline operations and pilot behavior. Some pilots and aviation organizations argued that the film exaggerated the likelihood of an airline captain with severe substance abuse problems remaining employed and operating commercial flights without detection. They suggested that the movie's portrayal of airline safety systems, crew relationships, and professional oversight did not accurately represent the standards and procedures of real-world commercial aviation. The Airline Pilots Association, ALPA, criticized certain aspects of the film's depiction of pilots, stating that while Flight was an engaging drama, it should not be considered a realistic representation of professional airline crews. The organization emphasized that commercial aviation maintains strict safety procedures and monitoring systems designed to prevent situations similar to Whip Whitaker's circumstances. Aviation professionals argued that the film's dramatic needs sometimes took priority over technical accuracy. Commercial airline pilot and aviation writer Patrick Smith also criticized the portrayal of Whip Whitaker, arguing that a pilot with such severe alcohol and drug-related issues would be unlikely to remain in an airline position in real life. Smith suggested that the character risked creating an unfair stereotype of commercial pilots, including those who have experienced addiction and successfully recovered. He also questioned several specific aviation elements, including Whip's relationship with his first officer, certain decisions made during the storm sequence, the aircraft's unusual descent, and aspects of the emergency landing procedure. However, many critics and audiences viewed these technical criticisms as secondary because Flight was ultimately intended as a psychological drama rather than a documentary about aviation. The film's primary focus was not to provide a completely accurate depiction of airline procedures but to explore the internal struggle of a man confronted with the consequences of his choices. Most reviewers agreed that the emotional power of the story came from Whip's personal journey rather than the realism of every aviation detail. Overall, Flight was widely regarded as one of the notable adult dramas of 2012. Critics praised Robert Zemeckis' direction, John Gayton's screenplay, the film's serious examination of addiction and responsibility, and above all Denzel Washington's award-nominated performance. Although some aviation experts criticized the movie's technical accuracy and portrayal of pilots, the majority of reviewers considered those issues minor compared with the film's larger achievements. Ultimately, Flight succeeded because it transformed a disaster scenario into an intimate examination of human weakness, accountability, and the possibility of redemption. Review 1. After spending most of the last decade laboring over a string of motion capture CG films I'd prefer to forget, director Robert Zemeckis finally returns to live action this weekend. To his credit, he certainly didn't tackle an easy project for his return, choosing a challenging drama the likes of which aren't seen very often in modern multiplexes. He's also blessed with a fully committed lead actor in Denzel Washington, but ultimately gets stranded by a perplexing script by screenwriter John Gayton. There's much to like about the film, particularly the tandem of Zemeckis and Washington, but its abhorrent lead character and his poorly defined motivations keep the project earthbound. Washington plays ace commercial airline pilot Whip Whitaker, a lifelong functioning alcoholic who manages to maintain his successful career in spite of his propensity for self-destruction. After a typical night-long bender with a flight attendant, he arrives for work still wasted but proceeds to strap into the cockpit and pilot a 100-plus person flight through massive turbulence. He also sneaks in 3 mini bottles of vodka and his morning orange juice partway through the flight. All is well until the plane appears to suffer mechanical failure and enters a steep descent, with Whitaker eventually taking the unorthodox approach of positioning the jet upside down to slow its dive. He lands the plane in a field and saves all but 6 of the souls on board. Unfortunately, his favorite flight attendant is one of the 6. The descent is a thrilling sequence handled with finesse by Zemeckis, and surely the most memorable portion of the film. Meanwhile, A heroin junkie scores a fix from a porn producer and returns to her seedy apartment to shoot up. Predictably, she overdoses and ends up getting carted off in an ambulance outside her home just as the doomed flight is passing overhead. Why do we care? She has no apparent relation to Whitman, and hence no perceived reason for us to be spending so much time with her. There's no reason for us to visit the porn set or meet her stereotypical slumlord, as that whole scene could have been cut without impacting the junkie character establishment. Thus begins a string of questionable scenes that hamper the film's progress. In the aftermath of the crash, Whitaker ends up in the hospital where he's promptly visited by his dealer. He likes cocaine in addition to his booze. An entirely too buffoonish John Goodman. He enters the film sauntering down the hospital hallway bigger than life, with a long ponytail, dudish slacker attire, and comedic dialogue entirely out of place immediately following the harrowing crash and overdose scenes. It's like we've suddenly entered a different movie, one I frankly didn't want to be in. Immediately following this travesty, we get another comedy routine in the hospital stairwell from a terminal cancer patient. Sure, it's funny, but why is it in this film? The character appears while Whitman and the junkie are meeting for the first time when they're both sneaking smokes. But there's no justification for his appearance other than to temporarily lighten the mood of a film that is otherwise demanding to be taken seriously. After the hospital stay, Whitaker retreats to the safety of his grandfather's abandoned farm, eschewing his own condo and the media carnival outside as the press attempts to make contact with the hero pilot. Meanwhile, the feds are conducting their investigation into the crash and easily determined that Whitman was inebriated during flight, leading to a dust-ups between the pilots' union, the airline, and the authorities that threatens to send Whitman to jail for the rest of his life. So how does he respond to this wake-up call? By continuing his spiral down the bottle, stopping only briefly to rescue the now homeless junkie and take her to his farm. She becomes something of a ray of salvation for him, as she successfully combats her own addiction and attempts to rescue him as well. This isn't really a feel-good film though, and he's a hardcore alcoholic, so his empty promises to reform never come true. The pilot union hires a sharp attorney played by Don Cheadle who successfully kills Whitaker's damaging toxicology report, leaving only one final hurdle between Whitaker and freedom, a public hearing similar to a congressional review where Whitaker just needs to lie convincingly to get off the hook and enjoy his hero status for the rest of his life. He's a gifted liar, so this seemingly doesn't present much of a challenge for him. I liked seeing Cheadle and Washington playing off each other again for the first time since Cheadle's breakout performance in Devil in a Blue Dress, although his role here was surprisingly one-dimensional and brief. I also enjoyed seeing two vets of homicide, life on the street in the same production, although not in any scenes together. Melissa Leo as the head of the final review board and Peter Zarate as the good old boy owner of the airline. I didn't like Washington's character, so he did his job well. Whitaker is an unrepentant drunk who blows every chance for redemption until the end, and at that point his tipping point is so unbelievable and ill-supported by the weak character development that his confession rings completely hollow. This is entirely the fault of the script, and it comes as no surprise that Gatens was also an alcoholic since he writes the character more as a stubborn success than a spiraling loser. It's as if he wants us to know that he survived his alcoholism just fine, especially in light of the premise that Whitaker's drinking had absolutely no detrimental effect on his ability to save the plane. There's no message to be learned here, and his attempt at a tidy bow tie at the end just comes off as more laughable than cathartic. In spite of the significant script deficiencies, I left the film conflicted about whether or not I liked it. Washington is really effective, and Zemeckis gives him space to explore the character with languorous, close-up shots that are in no hurry to dazzle with fancy camera work or dialogue. We learn the most about the character by just studying Washington's face as his tightly bottled emotions play out in barely perceptible flickers. Whitaker maintains a relaxed aura of control, even when he's totally out of control, in both action and emotion. We may not like him, but damn if it isn't great being given the opportunity to experience him in a mostly mature film that clearly isn't primarily concerned with immediate box office results. 2 Denzel Washington stars in a new film as a heroic but troubled airline captain in Flight. This is a film that manages to effectively blend a first-rate thriller and a compelling drama into one fluid storyline that will have most viewers glued to the edge of their seats throughout. The film really takes place in two parts of the story leading up to a stunningly harrowing and realistic crash, one of the two best I've ever seen, and then the aftermath and ramifications that follow the incident itself. From the very first frames of the film you realize this is a Denzel Washington we don't see often. We get the suave ladies' man we've seen before but with a deeply troubled soul. Whip Washington is dealing with the harsh realities in his life by drinking and using drugs far too much. On the day of the crash he's had virtually no sleep and was clearly drunk and then some. What's most striking about the movie, and his portrayal, is how this situation gets under your skin. You spend much of the experience twisted in knots over the innate desire to want to show sympathy for his character while, at the same time, realizing he's his own worst enemy. Viewers continually gasped loudly at each misstep even when those mistakes were clearly telegraphed in advance. You knew the wreck was inevitable but still couldn't bring yourself to believe it would really happen. This is a very realistic movie in many ways except, perhaps, in the final choice made by Whip. I fear most people would have gone in another direction but that's nitpicking. There's one scene in particular that resonates with me long after seeing it. Whip seeks out his head flight attendant, who points out that she's truly known him for 11 years, to feel out what she's planning to tell the NTSB, the real governmental agency charged with investigating any airline crash. I cringed watching it knowing that everything he said was very likely exactly the way it would go down if this happened in real life. He's driven to look for any crack of light to escape the vice. She has the weight of her realization that this man is probably the only reason she's still alive, but does that make lying for him justifiable? I love a film that forces you to ask hard questions and Flight is one such film. It's not a perfect story, some elements don't ring true but, as I said, most do and very much so. I spent quite a bit of time thinking about the full implications of the actions presented in film. For example, would Whip have been more or less effective in the crash without the alcohol? Perhaps it allowed him to remain calm when anyone else would have been paralyzed with fear or too hyper to choose the bold solution that saved lives. How can we ever be sure? The easy answer is clearly to just say it's always best to be sober, but is that the honest and accurate answer in this case? I really don't know. The cast is also excellent across the board. Most notable among them is Don Cheadle playing a very quirky but brilliant lawyer and John Goodman playing a character whose origins aren't fully explained or explored. You won't care as every time he's on screen you're in for a roller coaster ride. Just sit back and enjoy. And of course there's Washington, who could very easily pull off a nomination for his efforts. I can't really think of another actor who could manage to so seamlessly embody every facet of this complex role the way he does here. Flight is a film that will have a lasting impact for anyone that sees it. That's high praise for any film in my view. Three parents need to know that Flight is an excellent, albeit mature, drama about an alcoholic airline pilot and the investigation surrounding a plane crash he was involved in. The crash sequence itself is realistic and harrowing, with injuries and wounds. Drinking and drugs are also big issues, as the main character is a broken bar faced with a malfunctioning plane. Commercial airline pilot Whip Whitaker, Denzel Washington, pulls off a spectacular crash landing that saves nearly all the lives on board. Unfortunately, during the subsequent investigation, it becomes apparent that he was drunk while flying. Worse, he abuses alcohol regularly. In the hospital, Whip meets recovering drug addict Nicole, Kelly Reilly, and decides to help her out. In the days leading up to a hearing that could cost Whip his job, he tries to stop drinking, but with all the pressure, he finds the urge too strong. Even with all the people in his life trying to help, it all comes down to Whip, who must decide for himself which path to take. After too many years of gimmick and special effects-based movies, with Flight, director Robert Zemeckis once again finds the perfect balance between characters and spectacle. He achieved this in his best films, Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This is also easily the most mature movie of his career. A slightly less talented director would have focused on the heavy issue of alcoholism, but Zemeckis instead uses the suspense of the impending hearing, as well as rich characters and performances. John Goodman is a particular standout. The balance makes for a far more effective and appealing film. Likewise, special effects are restricted to the first act only and used to support the characters and themes, rather than the other way around. Moreover, Flight bravely includes many unconventional moments, ranging from powerful, passionate speeches by minor characters to amazing moments with no dialogue at all. Flight is purely a Hollywood film, but it's Hollywood at its very best. Families can talk about how Flight depicts drinking. Why does Whip drink so much? What are the results of his drinking? What consequences does he face? Do they seem realistic? Why doesn't Whip accept any help from anyone? How can you help a loved one who might be an alcoholic, addict? How did the violent plane crash sequence affect you? Was it too over the top, or did it seem to fit the story? How does a scene like that compare to something in a big-budget action movie, which has more impact? Why? Research shows a connection between kids' healthy self-esteem and positive portrayals in media. That's why we've added a new diverse representations section to our reviews that will be rolling out on an ongoing basis. You can help us help kids by suggesting a diversity update. For a long time, if you went to watch a Gerard Butler action film, you knew entirely what you would get. Some fun moments but no real substance. However, Greenland changed all that, and suddenly things became interesting again. But the question is, can that interest last? So to set the scene, Brody Torrance, Gerard Butler, is running through security, which is important because he is the plane's pilot. It feels like a relatively typical run on New Year's Day, bar for some weather and for a surprise passenger Louis Gaspar, Mike Colter, who was being extradited for murder. But then a lightning strike takes out all the avionics and radio, giving them only 10 minutes to land the plane before they drop out of the sky. They make a miraculous landing, but getting the plane down might be the easy part. There is an excellent slow build with the tension as we learn just how much trouble they are in, and the film manages to pull this off twice. The first is when the plane gets hit by lightning, and then when we learn just how much trouble they are in on the ground. Both of these sections work well because, in the first, it taps into a real fear when flying. Secondly, you learn just how bad things are before everyone else, so you see the signs in the abandoned mine before everyone else, and you know just how bad things are about to go. Did I say that the film does this twice because then the movie does it a third and fourth time? Oh yes, and then a fifth time. And it works every time. The setting works very well, as long as you are not from the Filipino government or understand the geopolitical realities of the region it is set in, an island outside government control, in an area outside of mobile coverage, where there is no reasonable chance of government rescue. Add to that some former military trained forces, which is not uncommon on commercial flights and is an entirely plausible scenario. So you don't need any suspension of disbelief, especially when everyone acts in very predictable and understandable ways. I like Gerard Butler in this role of someone who is out of his element yet does his best, and there is a family element here. But wisely they make sure the family is not on the plane, as that would have blunted the film's impact. Mike Colter works as the convict that you are pretty sure is okay but not entirely sure. It was interesting that the cutaway throughout the film was the airplane's crisis theme. You don't usually see this presented in a calm and supportive fashion. However, that might be the fault of Tropic Thunder,